All right, hi everybody. This is the Strength Club YouTube channel. I'm a starting strength coach. My name is Alex Koesarie. I work in the DC area. And the topic for today is going to be something that's been coming up a good bit recently for me in my in-person practice, and then also just as like a general discourse with a lot of my clients. Um, it's really about expectations, how strong is strong, where people should be at across years, across months, what should we consider to be satisfactory. And it's a really hard thing to nail down. On this channel, we've done an absolute ton of lectures. Chase and I have covered a ton of topics over time. So check out a lot of the older videos. They're all under the live tab. Today, I'm doing a solo one. Not sure how long this one is going to be, but the plan for this one is to sort of go over what you should expect in terms of progress, rates of progress, things like that. Really, where you fall along a bell curve distribution. Um, that's more or less going to determine 90% of your physical existence and your mental one. And then how we sort of relate that to athletics, and then sort of what's the point. Yes, so we're back. It's after the Olympics. Things are calming down. Not to say that it was at the Olympics, but life has been very busy with coaching. So let's get after it here. My contact information, Mick's contact information, Chase's contact information, two of my favorite quotes up here at the top and at the bottom. And then this is a standard bell curve. Most of us have seen this before. Most of us do not understand its ramifications or really understand the scale of it. This is a normal one. This next one is going to be what this looks like for, let's say, your day one deadlift. Okay, so this is going to assume you're with a wonderful starting strength coach. They're jacked and tan. They're telling you how to do the deadlift. The technique is spot on. We'll kind of see where most people fall. This big chunk in the middle, I would say, and let's not fool ourselves. The people who are watching this video, generally, they're going to be like 18 to 40-year-old men. Most of us, us and me included here, are going to be in this section right here. Okay, a little bit below average. The people who are on this far right side of the bell curve, they're generally not looking at fitness YouTube information. They're going and doing sports. They're doing cool things. They're out in the sun with their, Chad jaws, all that sort of stuff. People who tend to go and gravitate towards these sorts of information, these sorts of resources, we're going to be people who kind of need to fight for what we have. You're going to be smack down in the middle. You may be a little bit of flux on either side, and we have a standard deviation in either way. Most of us have not really met anyone down here. Okay, I've had the privilege, just because of my job, of meeting a good bit of people down here. Most people have met zero people in this area. Most people have met a tremendous amount of people in the average. And then all of these people on the left side of the bell curve, they're normally not in gyms. Okay. Um, so you may see this and let's say day one deadlifts and like kind of an adult man who's post puberty and think 95 pounds. You're like, that's not real. There's not an adult man who can do that, but they're out there. They're just not actually going into the gyms. Okay, and this is going to get into a conversation later with sort of like a representational bias. People who are over here, 405 on their first day for deadlifting or for touching a barbell. There's a really good story. I believe it was from Ed Cohn. This may actually this was an interview. I don't think it was in a text form, but him just talking about one of his like first 2 or 3 deadlift sessions when someone was like, okay, put this on, maybe try the movement out. And then I want to say his first time was a little bit over 405. If I'm mixing up this sort of fable, please let me know. Link me to that. But I know Starting Strength had a bunch of old interviews with Ed Cohn. So the most gifted athlete I've ever worked with, his first day deadlift of literally go up to the bar, like, ooh, what's this? His first day deadlift was 365. For everyone here in this middle portion right here, and then for everyone in this left tail, the left tail, that may be a lifetime PR. Okay, that may be I'm going to fight for this for multiple years. 365 took me 4 years of hard work and dedication to get there. For people in this middle point, that may be a year and a half. Let's say if you're over here, maybe like a year. If you're on this side, maybe like 2, something like that. But for him, Luke, if you're out there, shout out. First day was 365. I just got the chance in person to work with a Colombian ex-national team for judo. He was an alternate for the Olympics, genetic top end of the spectrum here. He's definitely in this portion, a little bit over 2 standard deviations away from our average. And then his first deadlift, he hasn't deadlifted since he's been a teenager, and then it was in Colombia. And then I think they just did them, 4 inches in the midfoot. They basically did them like a squat, and they just kind of did hang cleans. So he has no real history of lifting weights ever. His first day deadlift was 275 for a double, and it looked like it had about 2 reps in the tank. So if I really pushed him, if I wanted to like max out that day one deadlift, he probably could have gotten to, that 335-ish area. And then that is still an incredibly rare person. And just to give you some perspective, he fights at 81 kilos, so he walks around at, let's say, 184, 185 pounds, and then trims down a little bit. So for like a pretty average sized guy who just has excellent genetics, that's his day one deadlift. Whereas for a normal guy, that's going to take him a pretty significant amount of time. We'll go over these timelines afterwards. But, people don't really realize how much variance there is even on the first day of performance. I'm sure if we kind of put like if we sampled like everybody who works in the NFL right now, their first day deadlifts may well be over 405, may well be over that. If we sample people who are, professionals in powerlifting, a little bit weightlifting, they may be all the way over here. You'll hear stories and interviews from them, and then it'll be like, oh, my first year of training, I got to 500 and it really wasn't hard. It just sort of added, 10, 20 pounds each session. Then I got to 600 and then I had to start thinking about programming. Whereas, for someone here, like let's say we're right here, okay, we're a little bit half a standard deviation below the mean, which is going to be a lot of people who are searching for information on fitness YouTube. That may be entirely unattainable with steroids and with a lifetime of focus. And then that guy on the far right end of the spectrum got to that without thinking much, not to say he's not thinking, with the most simple programming you could possibly think of. Now, if we were to sample, if we looked at this curve and then sample who is talking about their fitness online and who is posting things, it is going to be people who are at least probably one standard deviation over the mean. It is incredibly rare for there to be popular training blogs. It's dating me. I said blogs, vlogs, excuse me. Popular training vlogs or Instagram pages or fitness pages or what have you, where people are kind of right here. It just doesn't really happen, So I have a bunch of like pretty really, well off, decently strong clients, and we'll go over some videos at the end just to kind of see, what normal looks like and kind of go over their timelines, male and female. But a big part of this is that, let's say this is a day one deadlift. We'll go over sort of a progress chart in a second. These are day one deadlifts. If you start out and your day one deadlift is 135, it left you sore for a week, and then let's say you already weigh 190 pounds and you're 5'10" or so. Chances of you eventually pulling 600, it's probably not there. The chances of you coming across people who do 600 is a light warm up on Instagram. That is 100%. So this is sort of what a day one spread can look like. Most human beings that I've seen, in terms of ability to keep back extension, this isn't gun to your head effort, but this is like ability to keep back extension, keep the bar over the midfoot, keep the hips sufficiently high. Most normally sized guys are right here. If we were to sort of overlay this with height, so like if you're 6'2" and then 230, just sort of naturally, you're going to be a little bit heavier on this, of course. If you're average size, if you're 5'10", and then let's say you weigh in between 160 and 190 pounds, somewhere around here. Okay. Determining factors for day one, and then really for everything else, it's going to be your parents. If your parents are professional athletes and they're doctors, and then they moonlight as astronauts, you're going to have a really good time in the gym. Things are going to come easy to you. School probably came easy to you as well. We are what our parents are for the most part. We have a pretty small amount of control after that. Are your parents pygmy vegans? So like if your dad is 4'9" and your mom is 5'1", and then you grew up, in the jungles of South America eating only fruit, chances are your day one deadlift is going to be a lot lower. Like I said earlier, number two, we have actual body mass here. Are you 5'4" at 130 when you start in the gym, which is a lot of us, or are you 6'2" and 215, which is less of us? Another thing is really going to be, leverages. We're just keeping this to the deadlift specific example because that's a little bit easier to go over, or at least more simple to kind of understand. And that's going to be mostly arm length, So it's like for me, if I'm doing a nice conventional deadlift and I'm picking my chest up and I'm not rounding my back, my deadlift finishes, like over my groin. It finishes kind of where my pants sit. Unless I'm really kind of rounding and depressing my shoulders. There are other people who they finish their deadlift, 4 inches above their knee. And then if you have any sort of activity history, this one is pretty self-explanatory. This is a super important graph. Most of us have seen this on the front of practical programming. In practical programming, this is probably in starting strength a few times, probably in the later programming sections. In our axis here, we have time, and then the rate of adaptation, and then where that's going to slow. The asymptote up here is going to be your genetic potential. Training complexity, we don't have to worry about that too much for right now, but the curves that we do want to see is our rate of adaptation. Rate of adaptation slows down dramatically. And then this curve is also very individual, so for some people it's actually pretty steady. It's a pretty steady decline. And then they respond to, mostly samey programming for years. And there are other people where you notice their rate of adaptation, their training complexity and the rate of adaptation, they're like really steep. They stop adapting super quickly, and then they really need a lot of training complexity very quickly. So you may have someone doing like 2 top doubles, pretty close to failure, then backing off and doing some triples. Let's say by like month 9 of them, it's going from no training to training, whereas someone else on month 9, they may have not changed from 3 to 5 sets of 5, and they may have just be totally fine increasing the weight. And then this is entirely aside from the actual number on the bar. Some people are actually quite strong, and then they still need that training complexity very quickly. There are other people who are very weak who need that training complexity very quickly. And as we see our strength potential reaching our potential, these are sort of like some examples of where someone would be. Just kind of, let's say these top numbers, let's say these top 3 numbers right here are going to be smack dab in the middle of the bell curve. Okay, if not slightly, and let's say smack dab in the middle of the bell curve, if not slightly to the right. And then the lower numbers are going to be someone who's, let's say, a standard deviation or so above the mean. People who can be pulling 500 within 2 years, I would say you're definitely towards the right side. If you're trying your damnedest and you're pulling 365 within 2 years, that's pretty normal. That's like an average human being, nothing athletically to write home about. And then we'll kind of look at our timelines here. So let's say, we're like 3 or 4 months in, you're pulling 245, fairly decent. You're about, like, let's say like a year and a half in, a year and 4 or 5 months in, you're pulling 305. Excellent. And then, towards 2 years, gets to 365. And then let's say from year 2 to year 4, if you're still grinding away at it, this may be like 415, 405, something like that. And then this may be your 4 to 5, this may be 430, 445. Whereas someone who's, let's say, standard deviation over on the right, they may start, let's say 3 months in, they took 20-pound jump. They probably took, 2 weeks of 20-pound jumps. Or not 2 weeks, 20-pound jumps, excuse me. Let's say like 2 weeks of 10-pound jumps, and then 5-pound jumps after that. And then, they're 3 or so months in, and they're pulling 365. It's not unreasonable at all. Happens all the time. A little bit over a year, they're pulling low 4s. Around 2 years, they're pulling high 4s, if not low 5s. Okay. Now remember, for people who are on the left side of the bell curve, a 500-pound pull may be a lifetime achievement for them. That may be all the way down here. That may be all the way over here for that person. Who's, let's say standard deviation to the left. But someone who's standard deviation to the right, that may take 2 years. That may take even a little bit less. Okay. And then, what you're sort of fighting for at this point, if we kind of look, let's say if we have our snapshot between year 4 and year 5, that's a decent training complexity, but then look at the rate of return you're getting right here. Okay. And then now, if you sort of divide this, if you ask someone who's been lifting for 5 years, if you go into any gym and you see anybody who's like reasonably jacked and you're like, hey, how long have you been lifting for? Chances are they're probably going to say over a decade. If they're older, they may say even longer. Oh, since high school, something like that. And then you look at their PR. Let's say that guy who's been lifting since high school, he's in his mid 30s now. He pulls mid 400s. And then you kind of divide that, let's say his PR or his working set, excuse me, is like 460 something, and you divide that over 15, 20 years. We're like, wow, that's terrible. You only gained 15, 20 pounds a year or something like that. If you divide people's performance or their weight, excuse me, for their working sets over the years, it's not really a good metric. It's not a good metric at all. It may actually look like they have a terrible rate of progress, whereas in reality their progress is excellent. It's exactly where it should be tracking. Most people want this strength performance curve just to be a linear increase. They want that slope to just be fucking straight. That's what people want. Okay. In reality, it looks a hell of a lot more like this. A hell of a lot more like this. As for our rate of gains, again, it's your parents. Number 2, this is one that I think is the biggest issue here. And this is sort of what separates the boys from the men. It sort of separates people who see incredibly large successes versus not. And then I'm going to go back to, let's say, back up here. Um, if you are willing, if you're an average guy, if you're right here, if you're smack dab in the middle, and then let's say, again, let's say you're even 5'8", and then you started at 150 pounds. If you're willing to go from 5'8" at 150 to 5'8" and 220, that's going to cover a lot of ground for you. That way you'll overrepresent yourself in terms of strength, and then you'll be like, oh, hey, I went from 5'8" at 150, I gained 70 pounds of tissue that you have to carry around. You're working with, you're feeding, you're sleeping with that, and then now, bam, tremendous amount of strength gains that you get from that. One thing I will say about most adults, so you watching this, the viewer, most of you, you know, I have met very few adults, unless you were like a high school cross country runner who want to put on a significant or appreciable amount of size. I've been about, I have a sport, I do weight classes, so it's a different scenario, but I'm a pretty normal representation even without that. I'm about like 180-ish pounds. My best pull ever has been 535. A good working set for me is in the mid 400s. I'm totally happy with that, and I've been there for a very long time. If I wanted to really crank my deadlift up into the sixes, um, really crank my single up into the sixes, my working sets up into the mid 500s, I'd have to gain another 40 pounds. My life would be very relatively different wearing another 40 pounds on. Most adults do not want to see very large increases in their body weight. If you sort of poll most adults who go into the gym, they're fat, they're 25, 30% body fat, and let's say they weigh 220 pounds, they don't want to go to 260. They don't want to see any increase on the scale. What they want is to sort of recomp. They want to feel good. They want to get up to these like moderate PRs. They don't actually really care about the weight. Um, Most people do not want to see large shift in body weights. If you talk to a 16 to 20-year-old male, let's 16 to 25 really, they want to see huge positive increases because most of them, aren't obese. So like if you're a skinny kid, you're like, okay, I want to gain 60 pounds of muscle. And I was like that at some point too. I weighed like 139 pounds, absolutely no muscle mass in my body. And then I wanted to get to like a nice lean 180-ish, nice lean 190-ish, and then I got there. It's fine. But is that willpower there to continue gaining another 40 pounds of tissue? Not really. And this is like a personal aesthetic choice for each individual. Like plenty strong already. Do I want to gain another 40 pounds of tissue? This is the thing that is going to really dictate your progress. If I think Andy Baker said something like this similar. He's like, if you're, like let's say 5'7" at 160, you're not going to do strongman things. You're not going to be like, hey, I'm going to go pick up this 300-pound stone. You're not going to go pick up a 275-pound sandbag on your shoulder and run around with it. You're just not large enough. If you want to do big strong guy activities, you need to go and look like a big strong guy. And for a lot of people, that means gaining a very significant amount of weight. However, I think we really underestimate the reticence in normal people for wanting to do that. Like most people do not want to do that. Most people want to be, if you talk to normal people when they're sort of starting their, let's say fitness journeys, as overplayed as that conversation, or to me that term is, um, what they're picturing in their head is like a muscular version of themselves at roughly the same size. It's actually super rare for someone to be like, hey, I'm just a normal skinny, fat, non-muscular guy, and I want to turn into a behemoth who weighs another 100 pounds, who is very muscular. That's way more rare. What is much more common is people who are, okay, well, I weigh 165 or I weigh 185 or 195 now, and I just want to be like a muscular version of myself, right? That's way more common. So when we're determining our progress, you need to see which one of these you are. If you're someone who is willing to go to 5'10", 160 to 215, you're going to see a tremendous amount of progress, right? Because then you have a whole nother, fucking like 50 some pounds to work with of mass to move weight around with. But if you want to stay at around the same size as you are, which is fine, if you want to stay around that size, let's say you fluctuate up to 180 and you're fluffy and then you cut back down and so on and so forth, you're not going to get tremendously stronger. You're going to run into this period of time sooner, right? Remember, so our progress along this curve is based off of time, but it's also based off of this, rate of adaptation. All of these things, they're all going to be tied into how much your body is changing. Okay, so if you've gained 80 pounds, you've now extended all of this, right? Your slopes have changed, and you kind of really padded yourself out for time. If you're, let's say, if you're already, you have like some self-esteem issues or body issues or whatever, and you just don't want to get any larger. Hey, you work in an office and then you don't want to have to get new suits. I work with a lot of clients in the military, and then they have a cap on their weight. They're like, hey, I'm 6 foot tall or 6'1". I cap out at 205, and that's it. That's all I have. That guy, his curves on all of these things are going to look totally different than someone, again, who is willing to go take these large changes in mass. And all this is, of course, assuming if you're doing the programming correctly. If you're doing like a light bodybuilding bro split, this means relatively nothing. So we're assuming that you're doing something like starting strength. Now here's the part where we kind of have to reconcile, facts, realities, feelings, all these things. There's a tremendous amount of bias in. The cell duplicated for some reason. There's a tremendous amount of bias in this whole conversation. The first one I would say is the most important one, is just bragging. People on the internet brag. You remember we've all seen the meme. Do you think someone would just go on the internet and lie? It's like, absolutely, yes. Like, people are lying constantly. People are bragging constantly. I think I've done it myself. Everyone has done it. You're in a room with a bunch of guys. You're in the gym. Someone's like, "Oh, how much is that?" And you're like, "Oh, 515. It's actually 505." Something like that. People do that shit all the time. Competitive guys, it's like, how long was the fish you caught? It was here. Mine was here. So on and so forth. We've all seen it before. The other one is survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is a little bit interesting. If we go back to here, let's say, your day one deadlift is like 125, and your hamstrings are exploding, your back is rounding, you're shaking, you're convulsing, you're like, I'm trying as hard as I can. This is 125. I'm an adult male. You're probably not going to stick around. You may really want to, and that's an underdog story, and we all love that, but are you going to stick around? I would say most of the time these people are not. Okay. And then this is just from a tremendous amount of experience in gyms and a tremendous amount of experience in athletics and just talking to people. I'm a very social guy. I ask people how long they've been lifting for, kind of what their numbers are constantly. It's probably creepy for the gyms that I'm at. People are like, oh, I wanted to see work for the Census Bureau or something. Most people who are in here, it's so, who knows? All the people on this side, they're going to stick around because they're getting that positive feedback loop constantly. Of course, some people will say, these very gifted people, oh, they didn't work for it, so they're not going to stick around. They don't care. They don't want it. But that's not really true. Most of these people who are really good at things, they tend to be excited that they're really good at things and then lean into them. If we could do the same thing with like your first day of playing piano, there's going to be people who absolutely suck. There are people who get it. The people who get it are going to be like, wow, it's great. I really like this. And then they're going to keep going with it. So, the things that you see on Instagram in terms of people's like rate of progress, all that sort of stuff, that's going to be all the way on the right as well. You're going to be seeing these like abnormal success cases, and then that's going to be really filtering, or excuse me, warping your perspective on all this stuff. Let's see what else we had. Selling you something. This is a huge one, absolutely kind of huge one here. Hey, and then you'll even see this amongst coaches when they're talking to each other, or kind of interacting around topics. It'll be like, oh, well, none of my clients have any technical errors ever. Or, like, oh, well, I mean, I get all of my guys. Every single one of my guys pulls 405 in 6 months. All of these sorts of things, which just kind of ignores physical reality. There's probably a bias in the people they're working with, or there's the bias in kind of what's coming out of their mouth. They may be discounting all of the times that anyone had a bad back tweak or tore something in their hip, or they may be discounting a tremendous amount of information to kind of present a conclusion that they want, even if they're not outwardly lying. But most of the time when people are selling you something, they're going to be dramatically overinflating what the results of it are. We're all used to this, just kind of as a concept. The big ones that I want us to take into account is bragging. We can just consider this what social media is. So 1 and 4 are basically what social media is, and then we have all of their links and bios. This is sort of just like the perfect storm of an Instagram post, of someone who's like, hey, I'm actually the strongest, coolest guy in the whole world, and I have 3 girlfriends. And then everyone who has less girlfriends and less weights and less PRs and less of a jawline, they dropped out of the game a long time ago, and then they're selling you something in their bio. So it's very rare to have someone very earnestly say, like, hey, this is going to be a really hard fight. It's going to take a lot of years. Your rate of progress isn't going to be what you want it is to be, but you're going to be alive for another 4 or 5 decades, hopefully, maybe even more than that, depending on how old you are. You should be exercising a few times through the week for all of those decades, and you're going to make slow progress, but that train is going to keep on rolling, and then our job is just to sort of make sure it's driving in the right direction. That message sucks. That's like my message. That's a lot of starting strength message. It's not appealing. It's not a mass market appeal. It's narrowcasting, like Rip says all the time. We'll get you strong. We'll get you strong in a fast way. Fast meaning efficient. But we're not going to take, like, programming and correct technique aren't going to take someone from here to here. They're not going to take someone from here to here. They're not even going to take this guy from here to here. What it's going to do is just going to make your user experience better. So when you're lifting weights, it's going to make your time, your day, your run of it, it's going to make it easier and better and happier and more productive. But it's not really going to change your outcomes terminally. Like, let's say if you're lifting weights for 30 years, which you should be, like I started lifting weights when I was 18. When I'm fucking 70, it's going to be a lot of years of lifting weights. It's like the outcomes over the long run, okay? Those are probably going to be pretty similar, but it's about the time and the ride that you had doing it while you're there. Um, uh, I'm trying to remember the exact quote, but it's every time it's applied correctly, it works. Something along those lines. Say that about starting strength all the time. The novice linear progression. Oh, there's Chase. You can get it stronger. You can get an amount stronger. And like we were saying with all that bell curve stuff and where the day one deadlifts are and the practical programming graph, that can be, you can take your deadlift from 135 to 550 over, a very long career of training if you're lucky. And that could be taking your deadlift from 115 to 365. We don't know, and it doesn't really matter. The things that I would say is, the rate doesn't really matter. The outcomes don't really matter. But what we can say is that faster is better, because faster is a clue that what we're doing is right. Okay. I can't really confirm that, like, let's say program is working if over, like 6 months, all of your working sets are lighter, and you've gained weight. Those are like opposite indicators. Okay. That means that something is wrong. Whereas I'm saying, hey, like, say, your working sets are slowly increasing and you're losing weight. I know you're getting stronger, right? You're leaning out. That's going to go really well. Let's say if you're gaining weight and your PRs are going up, great. Like, we're still in a good spot. Um, you know, the and then I would say, like, these sorts of messages where it's like the rate doesn't really matter, the final outcomes don't really matter. You're a body, you need to keep it healthy. Your physical existence is the most important thing. Strength is the most important thing. So you're in the game. You're in the game whether you like it or not. So you have to participate. But this isn't an excuse to dick around. It's not like, okay, well, I'm just going to do like random, light bodybuilding and never touch a barbell, and then, I'm just going to whine about my outcomes later. It's like you still need to take it seriously. But you need to not obsess over the figures. So it's like, if you're thinking, hey man, I've been training for 3 years, and then in this third year my deadlift went from, let's say, 385 to 425, and you're like, that's shit progress for a year. The first year I got from 0 to 315. How come this year I only got 30 pounds? The first year I got 300 pounds. Um, you know, when you sort of obsess over that sort of minutia, kind of the slopes of those curves, and then when you're getting those asymptotes, that's not productive. That's not actually going to really helpful. If you're seeing forward progress, that's great. It's just part of your life now. Accept it. Get back in the gym. So we're going to go to some videos now. Let's see, who do we got here to start? All of these are going to be like loose deadlifts, triples. You know, a lot of these people are going to be relatively strong. For most normal people, they're going to be relatively strong already. But we're going to talk about how long it took them to get there. That's kind of the big part that's different here. Let's pull this to full screen. Okay, so this is Nathan, firefighter, Arkansas, I believe. This is a light working set for him. He was doing, I would say, a 5x3 at 505. He's getting his straps on, and then we'll see how difficult this is. The form here is not going to be perfect because nobody's form is ever perfect. So we'll talk about the form as well. A little bit on the toes. Hips were a little bit low. Hips still a little bit low. Same thing. Hips still a little bit low. I can see the bar coming forward very slightly. And then we're just going to loop this one. He has a little barbell set for his kid in the back, which is very cute. So when we look at this, it's a set of 505. It looked like he probably had gun to his head, probably another 4 reps in him. He's working on his cleans right now, so we're trying to keep the deadlifts relatively fast so he can spare his lower back and then spend the rest of that time really doing a shit ton of cleaning volume. His peak deadlift is, probably a little bit under 6 right now, and this took him about 2.5-ish years to get to. Okay, um, Nathan is decently to the right on our bell curve. Okay, for most people, 500 could be a lifetime achievement. He can rep this out for a triple with like 3 or 4 reps in reserve, gun to his head, and then he still has enough in the tank to clean after this. Okay, he can do this for a 5x3, and then all of them are going to be 2 or 3 reps in reserve minimum, right? This is kind of far right side of the bell curve. Okay. You may meet, let's say, how many Nathans you've met in your life, depending on the circles that you hang out with. It's very possible you haven't met a Nathan before. It's very possible, depending on the circles that you're in, that you've met many of them. And then Nathan, for reference, I want to say he's like 6'1", 6'2", and about 240 pounds. So like a decently big guy. On the other end, this is Calvin. He doesn't want to screw up his floor, so he has these pads under there, neither here nor there. This is 325, and then this is going to be a triple around the same difficulty. But note how the bar speed is different. Like this is slower than Nathan's 500 was. Same thing. Hips are a little bit low. We're trying to work on his literal logistical setup. The bar being in that spot's not super helpful. One of his bigger technical issues is dropping the hips because the shins are way too inclined right now. And then Calvin also is probably doing this for about 2 years. He started at like 100 and, I remember he sent me some pictures when he was really lean at like 139 pounds, and he's like 160 pounds now. All right. So, he's been doing this for a while, and it is 160 pounds. Okay. And that one was very on the toes. Whereas Nathan, whipping 500 around with 3 reps in reserve, is at like 240. Okay. So same timelines, right? Pretty similar timelines at least. But we're seeing how differential the results can be. And then for the size of human that Calvin is, he's like decently athletic. He plays soccer. He's still pretty active. Like this is still a light deadlift for him. This is again in a series of I want to say a 5x3. So not supposed to be super stressful. His technique is degrading towards the end of the session. So I want to say this is the 4th or the 5th set. So it's not going to be very pretty. But what we can say is like, okay, he probably took his deadlift. I want to say when he started was like 135-ish. Now we're at like low 3s. 2 years, gained 20 pounds. Overall, by normal human metrics, if you're not being an asshole about it, great. And then another 2 years, he may be at like 430. He may be a little bit under 4. Probably more towards 430 if anything. But that's just about kind of a normalish timeline here. Pull in a female example. This is Karin. This was January, and then she's pulling sumo here. Conventional, just kind of almost always tweaks her back. She has crazy long legs, so it's better for us just to go for sumo for her, preferentially. This is a 230 for a double, and then we're going to watch the bar speed. So like real slow. Really lost the back extension there as well. Rep 1 was slow, rep 2 was slower. Corinne, like a super exerciser, she's been exercising, no, not training, she's been exercising, since she's been a teenager constantly, 3 to 5 times a week, probably more than 5 times a week for decades until I got my hands on her and then she started actually lifting weights. But look at how slow that 230 was. And then now this is July, and this is going to be 235 for a set of 4. And then we can look at that difference in bar speed. Okay, so she really likes to focus on physique work, as some of you may notice. So we're doing a ton of other work, a ton of lower body volume, things like that. We're not just trying to drive the weight up as heavy as possible. That's not where she's at in her life right now. But we can see what happens. So we have 230 for a super slow 2, and I want to say that was actually a top double. This is 235 for a set of 4, okay, and then this was for a 4x4. And then I want to say this was set 3 if I remember correctly. This could be a set 4 actually, I'm not sure. So this is kind of the end of a workout at 235. We'll look at how different that bar speed is, and then 230 in January for a double, and that was the top set for the workout. So something like that, for example, if we say, hey, how long have you been working out for? How long have you been exercising for? She'd probably say, 2 decades, okay? And then she's not even pulling 405 in 2.5 decades. That's not really the point. How long has she been training for with barbells? probably, maybe like 3 years at this point, 2.5 to 3 years. Okay. And then this is great. This is, we've satisfied all of the win conditions. She's getting stronger. She's building more mass, so on and so forth. But the actual number doesn't matter. That's not the important part. And then we'll pull up, longtime viewers here, this is MJ. Some of us may recognize this gym or where this is. MJ is getting over an upper back injury. Yeah, we'll go full screen for this one. Getting it over an upper back injury, and we have 420 on the bar. This was a top triple, and then it's going to have what it looks like to me, at least 1 rep in reserve, probably 2 reps in reserve. Okay, this is a heavy triple. See how this goes. Setup's good, stance is good. I would say maybe pull the heels in just a tad. Yep, good. Came off the ground on command. Lockout was a little soft. I think he's just eager to get through the set. Better lockout. Still coming off the ground on command. A little bit of stick. Finishes it. Good lockout. Okay, so that to me definitely looked like 1 rep in reserve, possibly 2. And that was 420. MJ was grinding around like 405 for hard singles for a very long time. Like he would just kind of work up and ramp up to 405 for like maybe a single, high threes for a single. And now he's at the point where he's recovering from an injury, recovering from like a sort of big sort of upper back tendinopathy or tendonitis, excuse me. Ligament pain, we're not sure what it is. It's kind of, spine pain in the high thoracic spine. So coming off of an injury, his triple is heavier than his single was, and it moved fast. I know, if the lifting police came in, and then before he picked this up, they were like, MJ, stop resisting, put 435 on the bar right now. He could do it. We see that wiggle room in the lift. So that sort of rate of progress, it's great in normal circumstances for normal human beings who are not lying to you or trying to sell you something. And we'll finish off with this Aaron. I used to work with Aaron quite some time ago. Hopefully he's doing well. This is 525. And then let's see how fast this is. I want to say this is a triple or a double, but we'll find out. A lot of setup here, so we're fast forwarding through the video. Imagine starting your cable rows right there while someone else is pulling 500. Okay, so that was 525. That was a warm-up single. Okay, we're trying to acclimate him to some heavier load. He was having some back issues, which is why what we're doing here is lighter work and then beltless conventional. Okay, so we see that super smooth single 525. This took him under 2 years, and then he's, I want to say 6'1", probably 220-ish, okay? So again, he's kind of more towards the right side of the bell curve, right? And then that moved just as fast as, Calvin's 320-something, just as fast as Karin's 235, so on and so forth. It's moving as fast as this guy is rowing, whatever that tiny weight is that he's rowing. Go on to the next one. Who else do we got? Oh, yeah, Mike. Oh, wow, this is a tiny video. So this is Mike. Mike is, I want to say, like 6'6" or 6'7", and then weighs over 300 pounds. So he's as tall as the squat rack. Giant guy. He's moving the barbell way farther than you've ever moved a bar, anything in your life. And then this is 5'10" for him for a volume set. He has sort of big guy technique. We're trying to get rid of the forward bar roll. We're trying to keep the hips up. So it's a work in progress, like everything is. That was rep 2. Here's rep 3. Lockout's a little bit hard. And then that's the end of the set. And then that, again, if the lifting police were there, gun to your head, definitely at least 1 rep in reserve, possibly 2 reps in reserve. We see this 510 for this triple. And we know it has a little bit of wiggle room to go, which is great. And then Mike has been lifting for a long time. Mike is a really good example. We'll go back to those slides. Here, boop. Mike is a really good example of someone who's probably like here, maybe like half a standard deviation over the mean, but just giant, right? Most of us aren't actually giants. Most of us, are somewhere in that sort of like 5'9" to 6 foot tall category. So like kind of a 3-inch spread, and then our weights don't actually fluctuate that much. Mike is a really good example of a very big guy, but he's not like here. His day one deadlift, if you see a normal 6'7" guy, you think, oh man, he'll easily be able to pull 4 or 5 first day. It's not the case. Shorter people probably have a better time with that. But he's not all the way up here, 4 standard deviations over the mean. He's a little bit higher than the mean because he's a nice, big, strong guy, but he's just huge. So that the smallest human being we saw in those deadlift examples were probably Calvin. He's like, I want to say 5'4" to 5'6" area, weighs like 160 pounds. And then the biggest guy was going to be Mike that we just saw, pulling 510. And then I want to say 6'7", and then low 300 pounds right now. Okay, so hopefully this gave everybody a good handle on kind of like what normal expectations are for normal people, normal human beings. Um, Okay. We're hoping to reboot the show. Just to, if you made it this far, thank you, of course. We're hoping to kind of get the show going again. Definitely check out Chase's Instagram. Check out my website. I do in-person coaching. I'm running a judo program right now, working with a lot of my athletes in the DC area. So if you're in the DC area, hit me up. Otherwise, I do a lot of remote coaching, programming for that. That's sort of my bread and butter. You can find me at my website there. Chase, that's his Instagram. And then if you want to get videos on the show next time, email them to me or to Mick. That's totally fine. We do a lot of forum reviews, so those will be in there. But otherwise, thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.